Alright, hey guys, we're back with episode 9 of Cave Story in Unity, and today we're going to be tackling object pooling, which is basically a way of keeping objects in, basically this pool where we can grab from them and spawn them into the game, and when we're done with them, we put them back into the pool. It's mainly an optimization technique, but it's also going to let us use them to refer to objects in tags rather than in literal prefab references, which is going to simplify the process so much when we start getting into other projectiles like missiles and especially fireball. The cool thing about Cave Story is that you basically have a certain number of projectiles that can be on screen at any given time. Like for fireballs, I think it's 4. So if you shoot the fireball 4 times, then you're gonna have to wait for one of those fireballs to die until you're allowed to shoot another one. Anyway, let's get right into it. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna delete iShootable because we're not gonna need it. And by deleting it, we're gonna open up later for more weird types of projectiles. We should get a couple errors after deleting it. Maybe not. Yeah, there we go. So we're gonna go into gun controller, and down here where we have all this stuff, we are just gonna delete this. And then we're gonna go into gun, and we're gonna change our shootable prefab into a tag and make it from a game object into a string. Yeah, so that's gonna be weird for now, but later, once we actually get into it, it's gonna make a lot of sense. What else should we do right now? Just in terms of prep. So let's make a muzzle flash prefab. And what we're gonna do though is we're gonna take the Polestar bullet. We're gonna rename it to muzzle flash particles. We're gonna get rid of the sprite, get rid of the projectile, keep the particles, change the layer to default, and oh, I almost hit apply. Don't hit apply there. And drag that into here, because if you hit apply, it'll make the old prefab same as that. So now we hit apply, now that we've made a new prefab for it. So that's good. Okay, let's go to, let me close that out. Let's go to world, go to surface, and we're gonna do the same thing. Change it from surface hit particles to surface hit particles tag, change it to a string, and then delete this. And we're gonna fill it in later with our object pool script. And this way, when we have tags, it's gonna make the process so much simpler, you'll see. So now let's go into miscellaneous. Let's create a new object and call it the object pooler. Object pool manager. And we're gonna give it a new C# script called object pool manager. And we're gonna open this up. By the way, for this object pool manager, I took a lot of inspiration from Brackeys' video that I'm gonna link down in the description. Our object pool is a little bit different so that it works better with the systems in place in Cave Story. But yeah, it's other than a couple key differences, it's almost entirely the same as Brackeys. So total credit to Brackeys for this object pool system. I mean, well, he didn't invent it, but I took a lot of inspiration from this video. Anyway, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a class pool with a tag, a game object prefab, and an integer size. And we're going to want to make sure that this is system.serializable, which allows us to change it in the inspector. And we're going to have a public list of pools, and we're going to call this our pools. And then we're going to have a public dictionary. A dictionary, if you've never seen one before, is basically something that takes an identifiable feature, like a string or an integer, and then it'll spit out something inside it that refers to that. And you can set dictionaries, which is what we're going to do. And yeah. And we'll call it pool dictionary. And the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want this to be a singleton, like we've done in the past. Object pool manager, and call it instance. And in awake, we're gonna want instance to equal this, right? So in start, we're going to want to do a couple things. So first, we're going to want to initialize our dictionary. And that's just going to make it a new dictionary that refers a string to a queue of game objects. So the queue is just like, it's basically like a normal list, except it you can enqueue and dequeue, which means like if you dequeue, you take the top slot off, and then when you enqueue, you put it back at the bottom, which is basically how we're going to want our object pools to work. I'm sorry, I'm probably not explaining this that well. If you want a better explanation of all these things, just check out Brackeys' video. I'll link it in the description. But I'm gonna be primarily focusing on how this pertains to Cave Story. Yeah. So we're gonna want a for loop here, which loops through all the pools. Queue of game objects, object pool equals new queue of game objects. Then what we're going to want to do is, for organizational purposes, we're going to want empty transforms that are parents of everything. So we're going to want to create one right here, game object parent equals new game object, and we're going to want to name it to the pool.tag.toUpper. ToUpper just makes it uppercase. And we're going to want this one to be a child, so transform.setParent of this object. So just slot in transform there. Then we're going to want another loop for I equals 0, I is less than pool.size, I plus plus. Let me add a space there. And so this is just going to loop through however many, how big this pool is, and it's going to create a new object. So game object equals instantiate pool.prefab. And since we have a reference to this, we can do a lot of different things with it. So object.name, we're going to want to name it the pool.tag plus id plus I. So that's going to name them, you know, like if we have particle system 0, particle system 1, particle system 2, which is all the different, you know, values inside our pool. Then we're going to want to set active to false. We want them all to be false on spawn, right? Then we're going to want to enqueue it into the object pool. Enqueue. Actually, wait, before that, let's set parent transform.setParent to parent.transform, and then object pool dot enqueue object. An object pool is this one right here that we defined, and then inside so outside this loop, but still inside the big for each, we're going to want to add this to our pool dictionary. So pool dictionary.add pool.tag and object pool. So basically, in this dictionary, we added the object pool under the tag of the pool's tag. So that means that later, when we want to refer to this object pool, we can just ask the dictionary, hey, bring me the object pool with the tag of this. So if we have our tag of particle underscore muzzle flash, then it's going to bring us the pool of muzzle flashes that we can call from later. Let's see if this works for now. Do we have any? Oh yeah, this is, let's just delete that out. That's something else. That was just our projectile was still inheriting from iShootable, so just delete that and that should be gone. Okay, so let's add object pool manager here. And so we're want to create a couple pool. Let's create one pool for now, and we're gonna call it, say, particle muzzle flash. Okay, so we're gonna go into particles, put in muzzle flash particles, and then say 10. So this is in the center. Now if we play, it's gonna have a child, one that says particle muzzle flash, and then all our muzzle flashes down here, and they have IDs of 0 through 9, and they're all disabled. So that's working perfectly, looks like. Let's close this out, go back here. So that's all fine and dandy, but it's not going to be worth anything if we can't spawn them, right? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want a public, oops, spelled that wrong, public game object spawn from pool with a string tag of vector3 position and a quaternion rotation. And this is going to be basically our trump function that's going to allow us to spawn from the pool wherever we want based on just a tag. Yeah. So there's a couple checks we want to do first. We want to say if pool dictionary dot contains key tag, and we're putting in the exclamation point, so this is reverse. So if it doesn't contain this tag, then we want to debug out a log warning. Tag, do that, tag plus that, not found. Great. And then we're going to want to return null. The reason you can't return just like normal is because it's a type game object, so we need to return some kind of game object, and null counts. All right. The other check we want to do, and this is where we're changing from Brackeys a little bit, is that we want if the current peak, so dot peak. So peak basically means peeking at the top of the queue to see what it is, okay? And we want to check if it's active. And if it is active, make sure this is active self, not active in hierarchy. So if it is active, then we want to return null. Because like I mentioned before, how the projectiles work is that it only lets you have a certain number of projectiles on screen at a time. So if the current projectile right now is not, then we don't want to be able to spawn it. That's how that's going to work. And I'll demonstrate that later, but for now, just keep that in. Then we're going to want a game object to spawn equals pool dictionary tag dot dq. So dq means it's going to take it out of the queue and give it to us in this reference, object to spawn. So what do we want to do? We want to set the object to spawn dot transform dot position equals position. We want object to spawn dot transform dot rotation equals rotation. And then we want object to spawn dot set active to true. We want to set active to true after we do this because like our projectile is going to have some on enable functions that we want to happen after these, because we actually want to set the position and rotation inside of that. Okay, so pool dictionary dot tag dot enqueue the object to spawn. So after we're done with doing all this, we want to put it back into the queue, but at the end, so that it remains in the pool. And then we just want to return object to spawn. Simple. So let's try this with projectile, because since we deleted all the instantiation, our quote can't actually shoot right now. So let's go to guns and go to projectile, and we're gonna have to change a couple things. So first off, we're gonna change shoot. Since this isn't an iShootable, we can actually change shoot now. We're gonna change it from shoot to on enable. Okay, so that means this, whenever this gets enabled, this is going to happen. So we can actually move some of these from on enable to awake to be a little bit more performant, so that you know, because since it's the same particle, these only have to happen, you know, once per particle's lifetime, I guess. Because when it dies, we can just set it back and then do all these things like normal. So actually, this time equals range divided by speed. We can make that a little bit more performant by making a new float called max time, and we're actually gonna delete this, put it in awake, but instead of time, we're gonna say max time. Oops. And over here in on enable, we're just going to set time to equal max time. Simple. And under die, where's die? So, oh, here's one thing. We're actually going to delete the muzzle flash because, like I explained before, particle systems are not going to be handled by the object pooler. So this is going to give us an error. We can just delete that. We can worry about that later. And over here, this sprite, all that stuff, we can just delete that and GameObject.setActive to false because we don't have to worry anymore about the actual particle system being still alive even after the object dies. We can just set our bullet to false. And by setting it to false, it'll actually reset it over there, right? Because once you set it to false, it'll be able to pass this test right here, and we'll be able to continue it later. Tight. So everything else probably is fine. Gun, we changed it to shootable prefab tag, right? Okay, so now we're going to go into shooting, and we're going to change it a little bit. So now we're actually going to use the object pooler and say object pool manager dot instance, because we set the instance before, right? Dot spawn from pool. We're going to say equipped gun dot shootable prefab tag gun transform dot position gun transform dot rotation. This is actually kind of unnecessary, I guess. I don't know. I guess we could try and optimize that later. But for now, that's fine. Okay, so now if we go, we're gonna have to go into the object pooler, object pool manager, and let's create, we're gonna create some more particles. So particle blood. I'm just filling in because I like the particles to be in the beginning, and then particle surface hit. Tab that in, and then projectile polar star 1. We want our naming conventions to be really consistent so that we don't have to keep looking back at this every time we want to do something. So we'll say, the type of object it is, so particle or projectile, then the name, and then for projectiles we'll have the level at the end. So since this is the first level, it's going to be 1. And we're going to actually set this size to 1 because the polar star can only have one projectile out at once. And then later, when we do the fireball, we can change it to like 3, and you'll see how that works. So now let's go to guns. Let's go to the polar star, and we'll change the shootable prefab tag to, as we did it, projectile underscore polar star underscore 1. Now let's play and see how this works. Sweet, it's working perfect. And if we open up the projectile polar star, we can see it's right there, and it's spawning out, and when it dies it just gets deactivated and it spawns back. So right now it doesn't, when it collides with things, it doesn't spawn a particle, and it still has that muzzle flash particle. So there's a couple things we're gonna have to do. We're gonna go to the polar star, and we're actually gonna remove this particle system because we don't need it anymore. And now we're going to go back into projectile, and we're going to say when it dies, we're going to say object pool manager dot instance dot spawn from pool particle muzzle flash transform dot position. We're going to want that to be quaternion dot identity because we don't want the muzzle flash to rotate based on where it is, right? We're going to want to take this, and we're going to want to copy it and paste it right here in on enable because we want that to happen every time these particles spawn. And we'll see that works perfect. So now we're getting an error where if we shoot too much, then nothing is happening here, which is weird, right? And the reason for that is because all of these particles got enabled, and now they're staying enabled. And that's a problem because like I explained for the object pool manager, we don't want them to spawn if they're still active, right? But the thing is, we can make an exception to that for particle systems because particle systems, like after they're done, they don't do anything after, right? So what we're going to do is in spawn from pool, we're going to have another bool called, it's a good name, ignore if active, and we're going to set this equal to true by default, and we're going to say over here, you know, if it's active self and ignore if active, right? Set that to true. You know what? I realized that this is actually not the problem. So this is all fine and dandy, right? Ignore if active, you know, bool ignore if active if false. And it is still spawning in the particles. That's not the problem. The problem is that the particles already, you know, did their due when the first time they were spawned, right? They already spawned out the particle system. So what we need to do is we need to create a whole new script here called Poolable particle system, and this is going to be a really basic script. All it's going to do is it's going to require component type of particle system, and then it's going to have a particle system particles, and on awake it's going to set particles to get component particles, or get component particle system, and then in the on enable, or I guess this doesn't need to be public, on enable, we're going to say particles.play. The problem is now that it's not getting disabled afterwards, right? So for it to call on enable, it needs to get disabled after. So we're going to invoke a new function called disable object after particles.main.duration, and add one just to be safe. 1 second. And we're going to say private void disable object, which is the function we just referenced right there, is going to be GameObject.setActive to false. So let's try it out. Oh wait, actually we have to assign that to all our particles. So we'll go down to particles, and for all these we're just going to add poolable particle system, poolable particle system. Wait, might have been able to do that all at once. Whatever. And now if we play it, we can go shoot. Huh. Okay, so the problem is now it is working, but there aren't enough particles to sustain it for all that time. And this has a really easy fix. All we have to do is go into muzzle flash and pump up the number to like 20. Now if we do it, we'll always have enough particles at any given time, and it should work fine. And if you open this up here, you can see the particles like kind of in a wave, like getting activated and deactivated, which is so cool. Yeah, so next we just have to add this into you know, the surfaces, right? So let's go to the grid and tile map. So here we have a surface, and we're just going to change this to particle and hit particle, which is what it's called, I think. No, it's surface hit. Particle surface hit. And let's go to the bat, and we're going to change him to particle blood. You know, I think I can change this from 1 whole second to maybe like 0.3. It's because we have to go to surface, and we actually have to do the whole particle thing. So let's just copy that in from projectile over here, and we're just going to change it from surface hit particles. We're going to change the particle to muzzle flash into surface hit particles. We have to change it to not the transform of this, but the transform of the hit. I know this episode we had a lot of problems, but in the end, everything gets fixed. Everything always gets solved. And now we can see that our particles are working great, our projectiles are working great, everything is working phenomenally, and it's all completely optimized. We can see them all over here, and this is going to make everything like a hell of a lot easier when we get into other particles and other projectiles. So we have set the groundwork, and now I think next episode we're gonna try our hand at some other projectiles, some other weapons. Maybe the missile launcher or the fireball. I'm thinking those are some good two first ones. Comment below which one you would want first. I know I'm being a little cheeky with the comment below, but yeah. So object pooling working great, and I'll see you guys next time.